community. Welcome to Behind the Message. I'm Sherry Banky, and I am part of the Yellow Box Small Groups team. We are here talking with community pastor Carrie Laddister. Almost said Carrie Ludacris.
That works.
That works. We are in week 2 of Profiles of Courage. If you missed week 1, please go back to communitychristian.info. You can kind of catch up on that. But we are going to talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But before we even jump in, I love the Anne Lamott quote that you said about dessert, because I am a dessert first person. Yes. And something that people may not know about you is you have a little twist on your desserts that you make.
Oh, yes. I love dessert also, probably too much. And so I like to bake, and I like to try to make them sugar-free and grain-free. So then I can justify like eating dessert anytime, all the time, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Yes. So yeah, I love desserts too.
And I've had the sugar-free, grain-free stuff, and it is good, and it helps with indulging a little bit.
There are some people on the Yellow Box team that would not agree and like to give me a real hard time about my baked goods, but yeah, I love them, and I feel good about them.
They're not here right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. I'm going to appreciate that.
Cool. So I love the Roosevelt quote. Where did you first hear that quote?
Yes. So Brené Brown shared this quote at a talk. This had to have been like 10 or 12 years ago, and she shared the whole thing. I just shared a couple of sentences in it, and it's very powerful quote that really talks about like the difference between the critic and the person in the arena. And she does such brilliant work talking about shame and wholehearted living. And so, it stuck with me since then. And I feel like since then it's become kind of popularized.
Yes,
since I heard her use it. But
no, I remember seeing her part of the Leadership Summit say that quote, and I'm just a huge fan of her, so I like that quote. I think I've used parts of it to inspire my kids to get in there and do things, right?
Yeah. And the premise of like, oh, it's so much easier to have kind of faux courage when you're not in the ring, or when you're hiding behind a computer screen, or any of those kinds of things where she's like, the person who's actually doing it, who's actually living, who's showing up to life is the person with courage. So it's a really powerful one.
Very cool. So 3 lessons. Part of the message today was God meets us in the furnace, reaches others through the furnace, and then blesses us through that. How have you seen that truth come alive in your life? Play out?
I mean, I think of like a really hard season of walking through the furnace that in my own journey, I experienced God like in the midst of that, maybe more than I had at any other time in my life. And actually, I think when I was in it, at first it was really disruptive. Like, this isn't how it's supposed to go. Like, if I follow God, it's supposed to be good. Things are so, and so it was kind of surprising. And again, like, God, did I hear you on this? Did I hear you on this? I thought I was just being faithful, kind of stepping into this situation. But yeah, God's presence became more real in that time in my life. As hard as it was, as fiery as it was, as painful as it was, than maybe any other kind of season I've walked with God through.
I've seen that as well in my life whenever I think about the furnace moments, I guess. And not that anybody willfully wants to enter into those, but it is a time of forging some intimacy with God that is really difficult to get there unless you kind of walk through those seasons.
I guess. And maybe I walked away from that one, tell me if this is true of yours, rather than thinking like, oh, following God means everything's going to be good. It was like, oh, no, following God means he's going to be with me whether it's good or not. And that is kind of what changes how you experience that. Was that your experience too?
Definitely. And whenever I see the quotes of kind of everything happens for a reason, I pause, because it's like, whoa, there's things that do happen. It's not always this kind of blessed life that I think the faith journey lends itself to. And I think whenever I hear this story, I do get concerned that people might pick up on that, oh, everything happens for a reason. Can you talk to that a little bit about people who might be in a furnace season?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that is an unhelpful cliche. And there's probably a lot of different views on God's sovereignty. Like, we might not even view it the same way. Probably most people in our community could have different views on God's sovereignty. I have had to really work through this, mostly because of that furnace season. And I just can't get there that God causes bad things to happen, but I can get there that God uses bad things. Like, I just can't get there with the amount of pain and harm we see in the world. The idea that like, oh, that happens as a test, or God, I think God can produce good through anything. I think he can use hard things for our good and for his glory. Like, and I don't question that for a second. But Yeah, the idea that God kind of orchestrates bad things, or in some ways that turns God into a puppet master too. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, that's a hard cliche to swallow maybe.
Yeah.
But whatever it is somebody is facing, I do think God can use and can produce good fruit through it and from it. But yeah, that's a hard one.
Mm-hmm. So I found this language of bowing down so interesting, because I think when we hear the word bowing down physically, I kind of get this image in my head of what may have happened in ancient time with, kings and such. So that's not physically what we do now, but metaphorically, how do you see people bowing down in our culture today?
Yes. So, I mean, I could think about even just kind of our surrounding area here. I have a friend who is a pastor in New York City, and he talks quite often about like being aware of the gods of your city or the gods of your community, or like the challenges that your community is facing. And I think, several of them in this area are probably things like accomplishment or achievement, or maybe even status, or like this is kind of a wealthier area, and I think we can end up metaphorically, to your point, bowing to things like that we're worshiping, right? And I don't even know that we would say intentionally we're making that choice, but maybe we're influenced by the stories of other people around us, or how our neighbors are living, or we can get into this competitive nature, this competition, and we can end up bowing to things that we would never actually say that we want to worship, right? But I think achievement, accomplishment. What kinds of things would you add when you think about?
Definitely achievement, and I see that in adults and in kids or students. We have a child that's the same age, right? 13-year-olds, and I see that playing out. The achievement just is creating a lot of stress. And then if you're not the high achiever, then that brings a different level of stress for our students as well. But I see that all the way through, even adults kind of in that same kind of achievement, busyness. Busyness seems to be kind of like it's still there. The word, the idol of busyness, having things, kind of always going on and not being able to rest or pause or even reflect, kind of, what is this an idol? I think even to kind of stop and kind of even ask the question and ponder about it a little bit.
And you think about status that we might assign to like cars or what home we live in, right? Like there's a starter home, and then there's like these tiers. Like these things are in our culture.
Right.
Marketing is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is really intended to kind of make us discontent with the things we have, to need newer or different things. So I just think all of those things, and maybe they pull on us in different ways, right? We probably all have some different idols or different motivations towards those. But this pastor friend of mine, when he started in New York City at this church, he felt really compelled to what he said was fast the gods of his city. And New York City is like a really great food scene, and people go out and drink a lot. And so he decided for a year to fast alcohol and to fast sugar.
Oh, wow.
As a way of like, I want to fast the things that are important to this community so I can hear from God and not bow to the things that other people might be drawn to here. So I don't know, that just stuck with me, to be aware of how am I tending to those idols in my own life that could, come from kind of what's saturated in the community around me. And it's probably a good invitation for all of us to explore what those things are, right?
I know. And the culture influences us in ways, I think, like you said, with marketing and stuff. I mean, the strategies are really effective because they understand psychology and human behavior, and
they employ people to like make them very effective, right?
Definitely. Okay, so this might be a loaded question, and you can say you don't feel comfortable answering, but what do you know is an idol or a challenge in your life that you have to kind of be aware of?
Yes. There is something in me that, like, to be strong or appear strong or be perceived as strong is something that I continually have to kind of tear down in my life, to live in a way that requires other people and being a part of community and interdependence. And some of that just comes from like wounds, but that's a huge, like to be, self-sufficient and strong is a big one for me.
Oh, I can so resonate. Self-reliance. That was my superpower. I don't need anybody.
Yeah,
like right?
totally. If I want to survive, I might not need anybody. If I want to thrive and like live this wholehearted life of connection and community and interdependence and flourishing and mutuality, and that's consistent work for me to not bow to the self-reliance.
Very cool. Thank you for being honest and vulnerable for that. And thanks for bringing us this powerful message.
Yeah, I hope it's encouraging.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You'll have to practice those with your kiddos. See if you can say that. I hope you join us back here next week for week 3 of Profiles in Courage. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great week, community.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Carrie Ludacris.
Carrie Ludacris. Pastor Ludacris.
Okay. That's my opener every time I teach somewhere, and it's like every time. It's the best gift this place has given me.
Do they actually play music?
No, but I did one time get off stage and some guy was rapping a Ludacris song about like flying on planes and pimping bees, and he changed it to like preaching bees, like preaching the Bible. I was like, I'm gonna have to look that one up.